Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Poetry of Reality monthly Q&A. I'm Taryn Southern. I'm a storyteller with a deep interest in how science can improve our lives. And I'm thrilled to be back here with Richard for our third Q&A session. We always have so much fun with these. And he is going to answer all of your burning questions that you have submitted via YouTube, email, and various social media channels. So how are you today, Richard?
I'm fine. I got cold, but apart from that, I hope I'll bear up.
Oh, goodness. Okay. Well, hopefully this won't be too painful then. So we'll start with the first question. This is from Twitter. The question is anyone qualified to be an atheist?
Is anyone qualified to be an atheist? I presume that what lies behind that is the thought that we could never be sure of anything not being the case, and therefore nobody is really qualified to know that there is no God. Of course, that's true in a trivial sense, but it's also true of fairies and leprechauns and flying teapots and everything else. So I'm not sure what the purport of the question is, but if that is the aim of the question, then that will be my answer, that we are as qualified to be atheists as we are qualified to be fairyists and teapotists and leprechaunists.
I love that answer. That's great. Okay, your second question came via email. The person asking this question said, I've recently been asking ChatGPT about God, religion, in particular, the obvious questions like, does God exist? Did God create the universe? And I was quite alarmed to find that it will neither confirm nor deny the existence of God. This is supposed to be AI. I don't believe in God, and I think belief in God has got us into the current situation in the Middle East. So why is society perpetuating this lie via ChatGPT and AI?
You can't seriously be surprised that ChatGPT wouldn't give a straight answer to a question like that. It's bland. It's milk and water. It wouldn't give a definite answer to a question like that. It's supposed to give a sort of impartial distillation of what various people would say. So I think you have to make up your own mind, as obviously you have, and I'm delighted you have made up your own mind. Don't ask ChatGPT to make up your mind for you.
And if I can add to that, I decided to actually go to GPT myself, ask the same questions he asked to see what they put in. And it was true. It neither confirmed nor denied the existence of God, but it did a nice job of sort of exploring the nuance of the sociocultural forces that determine whether someone does. And what I find with these kinds of things is it's always about the specific questions that are asked afterwards. So I asked GPT how they defined God or how people define God.
Oh, then you get a good answer to that.
You do, because it includes the abstract impersonal force that could even just be the Big Bang, the light. So, I think a lot of it just comes down to how you actually articulate the question.
Yes, I'm always very unsatisfied by definitions of God that say something like the universe or everything. Well, of course, if you define God as the universe, you believe in it, but that's not what people normally mean when they say they believe in God. They mean a personal consciousness that lies behind the universe and created the universe, and to which you can pray.
Yeah, what's interesting, though, in younger generations, you are seeing more and more of the co-opting of the term God to reflect this sort of impersonal light force. At least I have been seeing more of that. So it'll be interesting to see how you,
Is that right?
I suppose, engage with those. Yeah, yes. Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's an important question when we get into these dialogues to always remember not to make assumptions about what someone's definition is, because based on their cultural perceptions as a young person, they might have a really different sense of what that means to them.
Of course, you have to define your terms when you ask a question like that.
Okay, great. So this question came via email. It says this one was a few questions that came via email based on an article on the evolution of aging. This article was written by Dr. and I apologize if I'm not pronouncing his name correctly, João Magalhães. And the article suggests that early mammals during the dinosaur era shaped human aging, focusing on the pressure for quick reproduction genes rather than long life genes. And I actually took a look at this article, and it essentially summarizes itself under the longevity bottleneck hypothesis. Is this something that you're familiar with at all, Richard?
I think I know what it is. I mean, I think the idea is that mammals spent a long kind of apprenticeship in the time of the dinosaurs, because the dinosaurs were so dominant, the mammals were small, like present-day rats and mice, shrews and things, and which are very short-lived. And somehow modern, is it that right? The modern mammals have sort of inherited this short lifespan from our mammalian ancestors when we were living under the shadow of the dinosaurs. I don't think it's plausible because there's been such a long time. I mean, something like longevity is something that is susceptible to much more rapid change than, I mean, tens of millions of years, hundreds of millions of years. During that time, there would be plenty of time for lifespan to have adjusted itself to the ecological circumstances of each mammal species. Elephants live much longer than mice.
I do have a follow-up question of my own on this, because part of the hypothesis says that reptiles and amphibians, of course, show slower signs of aging and regenerative traits. Why do you think it would be that the reptiles would end up with that kind of degree of biological fitness, whereas we end up with better biological reproductive fitness?
Yes, I don't know the answer to that. It's true that we can't regenerate our limbs, and amphibians, for example, are very, very good at it, and lizards can regenerate their tails and so on. I don't think I can really answer that.
Okay, thank you. One of his follow-up questions on this email was, what are your thoughts on how genomics fits into studying aging differences between mammals and other species?
Well, I'm rather in favor of the Peter Medawer theory of aging, which, the Medawer-Williams theory, which no doubt he knows about, which roughly speaking says that any gene which matures, any gene which develops, which causes its phenotype to appear early in life or late in life. Imagine a gene for getting a lethal disease like cancer early in life. Then imagine a variant of the gene that gets you the disease a bit later, another one a bit later still, and so on. It's obvious that natural selection will push the time at which the gene gives you the disease later and later in life. After all, we're all descended from ancestors who lived at least long enough to reproduce. So the reason we age, we age and die, is that all these late-acting lethal genes catch up with us. You can make the point even more starkly by saying that a gene which has a pleiotropic effect, that's to say, which has one effect, which has more than one effect, that's what pleiotropy means, has more than one effect. One of the effects it has when you're young, another effect it has when you're old. So if the effect that it has when you're young is to give you a very high degree of fitness when you're young, and at the same time kill you when you're old, it doesn't matter if it kills you when you're old because you've already done your reproduction. So that would be my answer to the question, how does genomics fit in with the theory of aging?
That's great. And that actually leads into the final question in this space, which is thinking about these different evolutionary pressures. How quickly do you reckon longevity can actually change?
Theoretically,
our lifespan.
Yes, if we generation after generation refrain from reproducing until later and later in life. So if we said nobody's allowed to reproduce until they're 40, nobody's allowed to reproduce until they're 45, and so on, you would gradually, or at least on the Medawer-Williams theory, you would gradually extend the lifespan for that reason. I'm not saying it would be a good thing to do. Yeah.
Well, then you might see in cities like Los Angeles, New York, and London, where people are waiting later, perhaps that will actually occur. Okay, via Twitter, this comes from Our Human Franchise, and he writes, why are you so concerned with religious acrimony? Is human aspiration for an afterlife beyond your scope?
Acrimony?
I'm not too sure I entirely understand the intent of the question, but...
Well, I suspect the questioner probably has not read The God Delusion. He's probably getting it secondhand. I don't think I'm very acrimonious. Do I look acrimonious? I may sound acrimonious now because of my cold, but I don't get very acrimonious. Is the idea of an afterlife beyond your, was that beyond your scope? Was that the question?
Yes, beyond your scope.
What a weird word to use, scope. I mean, do I think it's plausible? No, I don't think it's plausible, but I mean, beyond my scope is not the right way to put it. I would say, I think it's highly implausible.
Is the afterlife beyond your expertise, Richard?
It's beyond my expectation. And the reason is that obviously our entire being, our soul, if you like, our thoughts, our consciousness resides in our brain. And so when our brain decays, obviously there's nothing to carry our thoughts on with us. So death is the end. That means we've got to live our life to the full while we've got it. It's the only one we've got.
I love that. Okay, next question is from Balaji Kartha. And they want to know, is there any actual physical or chemical evidence to show why humans are the only creatures that need to make up stories for survival? Is it the other side of having the ability to communicate through language?
Well, I think it's pretty obviously about language, because you can't really make up stories unless you've got language. At least you can't convey them to anybody else. I suppose you could imagine them. But language is a completely unique human feature. Of course, many, many animals communicate in gestures and sounds and smells and things like that. But only humans have language. Only humans have the capacity to make up a story. I suppose the nearest approach would be something like the bee dance, which makes up a story about where food is. But that's a very, very functional, mundane example. So I think humans really are unique in this respect, precisely because we have language. And language is a very, very remarkable feature of the human species.
And so do you feel that there's any physical evidence out there to show why humans are these creatures that need to make up stories for their own survival?
I don't necessarily think we need to make them up for our own survival. Clearly, we do make them up, and we enjoy them.
We feel we need.
Yes, whether we need them to survive, I don't know. I don't see why we should.
Yeah, it's so interesting because as a storyteller, a lot of times I actually think about my job as one where I'm in the business of finding the most biologically fit story. You know, what's the story that will become the meme that will get passed on and be understood and better understood by the masses. And it's kind of a fun way to think about language. You know, just what kinds of words resonate that capture our imagination, that create a sense of awe and wonder, and then what words do the opposite.
Yes,
do you find that there's any utility or purpose? Yeah. So, like for you, I'm curious, in your own life, have you found any purpose or utility for language or storytelling to help motivate you, let's say, on a project, or to inspire you in something?
I like to think that most of my books consist of stories. I think that, I mean, that, as it happens, they're true stories, but they wouldn't. But some of the best stories are not true. Of course, they're fiction. But the way I like to talk about biology is in the form of stories, and I hope that's why some people seem to enjoy my books, because I am a storyteller like you.
Yes. So that's our evidence of why humans like stories for survival or for perceived survival. Okay, next question from Dipanshu Patel. They want to know, why do you think people tend to become communal? Is there any evolutionary aspect, or is it due to conditioning by religion or beliefs?
Communal, well, many mammals and many birds are social animals and living groups. And so there are lots and lots of reasons why animals live in groups. It's good to avoid predation. It's helpful if you are a predator to hunt in groups. It's useful for keeping warm. It's useful for all sorts of reasons. There are many, many reasons to live in groups. Human society is something very special, again, because of language. And from even most primates, it's probably fair to say, are social, go around in groups, and humans are especially social. And since the agricultural revolution, we've lived in cities, very large groups, and religion is part of the sort of glue that keeps society together. That's one of the main theories about religion. It seems to me plausible.
They say, same old questions, same old answers. If God created everything, who created God? I've been hearing this at least since 1700. So I'm not sure if that was a rhetorical question or if he actually wants you to answer the question.
Well, that's the question I ask myself, of course. It's one of the main, it's one way of expressing one of the main reasons why I'm skeptical of God, because it doesn't actually answer any questions. And I think that's probably what the questioner is getting at, that you superficially think you've answered the question by saying God made the world, but you haven't answered it because you still haven't explained God. And the way I like to put it is that Darwin solved the big question about the origin of complexity, which is life. Darwin showed us how you can get from primeval simplicity to the complexity which we know as life. And so if you think about what it would take to be a god, to create the universe, it would have to be so complex that it's defeating everything we have solved in the Darwinian answer to suddenly postulate a complex being right at the outset of things. So that's my main reason why I don't actually believe in God.
Makes sense. Question 9 from Valentine Keen 9 on Twitter. Do you ever think cystic fibrosis causing mutation survives as an outlaw allele due to some currently unknown beneficial pleiotropic effect? For instance, a reproductive benefit of some sort or something to that effect?
Whenever there is a genetic abnormality which is very deleterious, it's tempting to think that maybe it's maintained because of some kind of pleiotropic byproduct. In the case of cystic fibrosis, I don't have any particular reason to think that that's the case, but in general, it's a good question.
Why do you have any hypotheses on why these survive if there is indeed no beneficial pleiotropic effect?
No, there could be just new mutations. There's no particular reason why they should be beneficial, but it's an interesting possibility that they could be.
Okay, let's see here. Rosie Lombardi asks, why did Homo sapiens develop a sense of awe when viewing the sky and ocean? What evolutionary purpose did or does it serve, and how has this feeling been co-opted by religion?
I think it's just part of a more general question about why did humans develop all their uniquenesses. It's not just a sense of awe, it's language, it's philosophy, it's mathematics, it's all the things that make us unique. I think of them all as emergent byproducts of having big brains.
Scientific experiments have been conducted which seem to confirm that telepathy is real. In one experiment, thoughts, as in neuron transmissions, similar to radio waves, were conveyed from Europe to Australia. In my own experience, in some instances, my thoughts seem to have traveled over 2,500 miles. Will we at some point be able to read people's minds without electronic devices?
I simply would dispute the premise. I don't believe a word of it. I think there's absolutely no good evidence for any kind of telepathy at all. When such alleged evidence, nearly always, whenever it's been looked at carefully, it disappears. It's rubbish.
Yeah, so I think what's happening here, if I'm reading between the multiple sort of logic jumps, is that work with brain-to-brain communication in implantable or non-implantable neuroscience is sort of being conflated with the transmission of thoughts. And if you actually look really deeply,
I would love it to be true. I mean, I would, I think it would be fascinating, and I love John Wyndham's book, The Chrysalids, which is all about all about telepathy. But the evidence, time and time again, evidence has been alleged, and it never stands up to proper scrutiny, unfortunately.
I agree. But for those out there who are very interested in understanding what are the frontiers of neuroscience, particularly implantable neuroscience, and being able to read, the actions of multiple neurons, it's very, very cool and very, very interesting. But it is not telepathy.
Well, I mean, if you stick electrodes in the brain or put electrodes on the skull, you can pick up signals, of course. That's right. But transmitting to Australia, no.
All of the people watching can continue to send in questions, comments via Richard's social media, email, Facebook, Twitter, all of the things. That would be great, and we will consider it for our next episode.
Thank you very much.
If you enjoyed this episode, you can show some support by subscribing to the podcast, sharing it with your friends, and leaving a review.